Ooh, a dull roar comes over the crowd. So hello. Right after the break, everybody should be super energized. So I'm Mike Dallas. I work for HP. Hopefully many of you in the audience have heard of HP over the years, Hewlett-Packard. And what I want to share with you over the course of the next 20 minutes are a few pieces of information tying from culture, how you embed a specific message in your firm and how you adapt that message over time, as well as where you embed techniques and technology in trying to espouse the culture. I'm wearing a pedometer as I pace across the stage, so I'm bridging with the wellness presentation earlier. If I start, many of you have seen advertisements recently for many firms around the world that began in the proverbial garage. So HP is one of those type of firms. Today we're over 260,000 people in 170 countries globally. But what I'm going to talk to you about today, I think, applies whether you're a two-person entity or a 260,000 person entity as we go between those elements. When we started HP, Bill and Dave, who founded the company, had rules of the garage that they started with that ultimately came into being what was originally called the HP way. And what got interesting over time, and I'll share with you a few of the originating rules, and I think this applies to culture in a broader sense, is people start to interpret what they think the rules mean. So the beginning rules in the garage, if you got to go there in California and look on the wall or see the handwritten sheets, first they had an aspiration to change the world. We can change the world. Work quickly. Quickly will be an emphasis point throughout the presentation. Work whenever you can. Keep the tools always open and available. Keep the garage open. There are times when you should work individually because you can get more done, and there's times when you should work as a team. You should always be thinking of new ways to do work, and the customer defines what success looks like or if you did a good job. The customer defines it. It's not your own self-definition. HP's been in existence since 1939, so 75 years in technology is a long time. Lots of different iterations of the company. And over the course of time, HP got to be known as a nice company to do business with. That's not a bad brand to have. Employees that were very empowered and collaborative and made decisions together. And as these things started to progress, they started to be more of a culture where people had to get to consensus. Slow, not fast. The people had to be working as a team all the time. Because if you were an independent, that was against the HP way. But that was never in the originating material where we founded the company. So by 2011, we faced a business condition which is not dissimilar to what many companies face. We had had 5 CEOs in the course of 7 years. So our current CEO, Meg Whitman, who many of you may know from eBay or other places that she's been part of, came into this culture where not only were we a 70-plus year company at the time, with lots of definitions of culture that were not current, even though people espoused them as the HP way. Business results were down, and we weren't even the company we thought we were, because in addition to the 5 CEOs in 7 years, we had done 70 acquisitions in 15 years. From large-scale acquisitions of tens of thousands of people to small technology-based acquisitions. Employee engagement, which we measure like many companies measure each year, was down dramatically. 57% of people claim to be engaged. And as we heard in other presentations earlier today, there's a lot of theory, we as HR believe, that engaged people do better work, and better work produces better outcomes. So as great, smart HR people, we had well over 100 initiatives tied to employee engagement. 100 initiatives plus as we started to count them. None of them were having the material impact that we wanted them to have. So the more effort HR put in, trying to come up with another program and another initiative and measure and metricize what we're trying to do, results were going down. So when we looked at this as a company, and our CEO and the company executives talked about what we wanted to do, we wanted to move the culture Even though it was an iconic element that people talked about the HP way and thought that it meant certain things, we found that what people were defining the culture to mean was not what it was originally intended to mean or what we needed it to mean, and it wasn't the culture we wanted to drive the organization forward. So many of you may see challenges that you can relate to on our list of current challenges on the left-hand side of the screen. And if you look to where the HP way now, and now is the key element, and now is an emphasis I would put on everybody's culture, regardless of whether you have a long-standing history of culture in your organization or you're creating a new culture, the ability to keep it current and fresh and defined in the way your business needs it to be defined is not only an active sport. Every time you're out recruiting somebody, you're saying something about your culture. Every time you're doing performance management, you're saying something about your culture. Every time you're hiring or doing executive coaching, you're saying something about your culture. The system, as Jan talked about, and looking at the magnets for talent that you bring into the organization says something about your culture. So we wanted to re-emphasize and relaunch, build on a brand. The HP way had iconic brand imagery, but bring that into the current. So when we talk about HP now, we talk about teaming for value. So teaming when it matters and creates value. Being accountable and empowered and taking the right risks. We found a culture that, as we went through what many firms are going through in terms of trying to cut costs and trying to find ways of being efficient, people were risk averse. Many of you may have heard a tagline for HP, historically, HP invent. That was in the DNA of the culture. Originally, that was the original intent. But as people became more conservative, as people became more risk averse, we were inventing less. So the challenge that we had was to establish a culture where not only people felt valued and developed and had the pride in the company, but the culture stood for the results that we wanted to get. A major point of emphasis for HP, and one that I'd argue for many companies, is to really define the impact you want your culture to have, what you want your employees to do. We were known as a nice place to work. We were known as a nice company to do business with. Those are valuable assets for us, and we appreciate those, and we try to build on those. But if we're not having an impact, if we're not generating results, effort alone is not the end destination. And we find with a lot of engagement efforts and a lot of culture efforts, they can tend to be framed in a nice to do way. It's all about making people feel good. We want people to feel aligned. And so goodness should come if you're aligned and performing. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview of the HP way now. And the original question of the morning, one of the initial questions, was if you were going to do this 2-minute interview, what would you say your company stands for, or how does it resonate to employees? For us, we define we make it matter. So we need to make impact. Making something matter every day, regardless of what you do, is at the heart of what we start. We think you need a rallying cry for culture. So regardless of what industry you're in or what your culture branding you want to create, we encourage you to create a simple rallying cry that people can work to how it relates to them. Then we wanted to define leadership attributes that we felt were important. We use these to look at how we hire people, how we measure success and performance, the leaders we appoint and promote in the organization. Always accountable. We found that as people were getting more consensus, we couldn't find anybody who was accountable to make a decision. Lots of people felt they could say no. Lots of people felt they could weigh in. But if you ask somebody who owns the decision or who owns the outcome, we struggled to find the right individual person or people to do that. Having this will to win was important to us. Back in 1939, putting the customer defining the success of the company at the heart of what we were doing, we found that people were not aspiring to be excellent. And many of you may be part of studies, analytics, where how many have heard of people trying to continually move out the bottom 10% of an organization? Or how many people look at the bottom of your pyramid? We found that people aren't looking at the top of the pyramid enough. That actually your high performers, your most critical differentiated people, don't like that your focus is always on low performance. So this will to win, people being really accountable, having a passion for customers are leadership attributes. We've redone job descriptions, we've redone interview guides, we've redone performance appraisals, we've looked at who are our talent movers and magnets and executive coaches along these dimensions. You can't just be capable and innovative, and you can't just care and develop about people. You need to do those things. You need to be able to do those things, but without the front end of that chart, we don't think you can ultimately live to the values that we want to espouse. Then there's core principles underneath, and we think it's the power of and. And too often in culture, I think you have a challenge on which elements to emphasize. And we think it's the combination of elements, desire to make a difference, meaningful results, and the power of people. And then we went back to the roots of the company and some of these core values that we felt stood the test of time for HP. And so a leave behind I'd give for you, whether you're a new firm, large firm, or small firm, is if you have grounding value principles, those can't be sacrificed in the name of making the business results. But they should be consistent and apply to making business results. It's not just being a nice to do business place. Business is competitive, as we all know. So what are the approaches? Is we started with Meg Whitman, and she had this passion for rebranding the culture, and we put this HP Way now out there. We've used social media quite effectively. We have 1.6 million followers on LinkedIn. We were the first firm to be over 1 million. Meg Whitman and many of our chief executives are out there blogging, putting posts. We do a lot on Twitter, we do a lot on Facebook. But what did we do internally? How do you start this change? Because HP has 260,000 people. How do you do that? First is we took this concept called Pride Builders. And we wanted evangelists within the organization. These are people that range from individual contributors who've been fairly new to the company, but you have to be at the company at least 2 years to be a Pride Builder, and up to executive level people. These aren't people who raised their hand and said, hey, I'm interested in culture. I'll tell you in a minute an avenue to take that energy. These are people we looked at the dimensions we value as a company and targeted specifically people who had the passion for customers, who had the will to win, who developed people or were part of high-performing teams that we thought could be evangelists for the culture message, to really take that to the grassroots. Because just having your top executives talk about it or HR talk about it, to us was not enough. So we actually took this Pride Builder concept globally, and it really manifested itself in a variety of ways, where in some of the Asia-Pacific countries, in Japan, they did a lot of collateral. They had mouse pads, they had big meetings. In Colombia, we had a lot of small group meetings, a lot of hands-on, a lot of employee engagement initiatives. We've had success in all parts of the globe with the Pride Builders, taking it in local language, but what we kept consistent is they had to use the same language, the same definition of the HP Way now. And we continue to refresh this group and have them do active quarterly events to keep the intention of what we mean by the culture current. We also opened it up. So the Pride Builders are handpicked by us to the group on who we want to represent the brand and the culture. Separately, there's lots of energy, and we as a high-tech company and living in a high-tech world would encourage energy. So we've seen our HP Way now go viral. We have rock bands in Norway, employee groups, interesting videos they post on YouTube. We've created our own event where we bring customers and partners and basically do a trade show of our own technology called HP Discover, but we've actually had employees petition on why they could go and learn about HP. So they become Discover ambassadors, they do constant blogging, they're on Twitter, they take YouTube videos, lots of social media. We've also taken our HP Way now into the community. HP as a company in the last 3 years has done over 3 million volunteer hours, and that's obviously a large scale for a large company. But like other parts of the discussion today, having an element of making it matter for communities is part of our brand, and giving people a chance to explain the HP Way now in our communities is something we've emphasized. So if I kind of bring this back on what does it mean for talent, We've been in the throes of a turnaround at HP since 2011. We had our CEO state a 5-year turnaround vision. 5 years is a long time. 5 years is an eternity in high tech. But starting with a commitment to that vision and having that continual point of emphasis on what our culture is about, what the HP way is now, leveraging these pride builder communities to keep those things current, has led to a variety of elements that we think are impactful. First, when we go back 5 years, we were hiring 2/3 of the executives in the company outside of HP, 1/3 from internal promotions. In the intervening years, we've actually flipped that ratio around, where we're actually promoting 2/3 of our top talent internally, because we have a crisper definition of what success is. For the 1/3 of people we're bringing in from the outside, we've actually found the assimilation into HP much more quickly, because they're not trying to catch up on 75 years of culture or trying to define stories or organizations that were for 5 years ago. They're really aligning to the core attributes we seek out. So we look for people with experience that have this accountability, have what we call egoless confidence. The ability to be confident in what you're able to achieve, the ability to go out and influence and put people at the forefront and hold people accountable, but not make it about you. Make it about the team, make it about the impact for customers. We've found tremendous success in extrapolating out what we take to hire people in, who gets promoted, or our percentage of people being successful in new jobs. The people who we hire from the outside who stay through that first 2 or 3 year period has gone more than 4x what we had before. Our attrition at large went from over 11% to less than 8%. And for HP, every point of attrition globally is a $300 million challenge. So again, laws of big numbers, but the truths remain the same. That if you start from a base of really defining and owning your culture, not let it be out there and managed for you, and translate that into who you hire, who you promote, focus on the top end of performance. We've found a lot of continual success in what we're trying to do, and not just from a nice to do, but from a business impact. I mentioned some of the executive openings and I mentioned some of the attrition, but employee engagement, something we all care about and we think translates into business results. We actually think this is a tougher culture to live up to. It's tougher in HP today to be successful because we're defining it around being accountable. You have to have an impact. It's not just about being somebody who's nice to do business with. You have to be successful and nice to do business with. You can't hide within the boundaries of broad-based teams. We have more individual metrics. We have more individual performance. We look to have people ascribe to how do you get to be the top end? Not just that you're better than the other bottom 10% of the organization. How do you become one of the top 10%? That's the metric of success. That's where we put our total rewards. That's where we put our emphasis. And we feel very good that while culture is always transforming and evolving, and we get a lot of questions because we hire a lot of people globally. Well, what's it mean globally? How is it different? Or we hire a lot of university grads, and we're going at that end of the pyramid. I tell you that the universal truths, if you're very clear on what you expect from your culture, and your leaders at every level of the organization operate in the same manner, it's a lot easier to get people that fit, and fit is super critical, and it's a lot easier to get people to be successful. So if we leave you with anything today, we do think culture can have an impact. We do think your definitions align to talent management, to recruiting, and your overall approach to how you operate as a group. Whether you're long-standing culture or something new, we think you can build on the positive elements, and we're happy that the HP way now is something we were able to share with you today. So thank you.